Appreciate that song that Macy and Nikki sang. It really goes along well with our theme today. Climbing up the mountain children, climbing up the mountain is an act of faith. And characters and individuals that they refer to in Scripture were all people of faith. And we want to take a few moments this morning and take a look at this chapter of faith in Hebrews. Lists. We all have lists, don't we? There are various lists that we live by, that we have. There are various lists that we see in society around us that we have. Just go to the internet, you're going to find lists on just about anything. Well, what are some of the lists that we have? What are some of the lists? Grocery lists, yeah, of course. That's the top one. Grocery list, very great. Well, to-do lists. Yeah, we have a to-do list. That's right, to-do lists. Things that we have to do. Maybe a day's activities, events, things like that. One of the churches we were at when we were at Lake Parsons, we stopped at one church, they had a big board. And on one side they had to do, and one side they had done. And you had paper that you'd have a place where you could put your name. And then if you saw something around the church that needed to be done, you could write that on there and date it, and then pin it to that board on the to-do side. And then that list would go to whoever in the church might be able to head up a group or take care of that responsibility, whether it was maybe the trustees, maybe the maintenance, maybe even some of the staff, or just individuals on committees, whatever it may have been. They get the sheet of sheet of paper that had the item on to do, and then when it was done, it would go over on the done side. And that was kind of neat because people could see what needed to be done and what was done. And that was kind of interesting to see that particular list. But we have a lot of lists around us and listings for different things. You see in the media, you see lists such as the 10 best dressed people or maybe the 10 worst dressed people. You have lists of the top recordings. You have lists of the top videos that are being rented. You have lists of the top movies. Fortune magazine, they come out with a lot of lists. They have their Fortune 500 list of companies. Interesting, I was reading about Fortune magazine, and they have a whole list of lists, I guess you could say. They have lists such as the 40 richest under 40, the 50 most powerful women in business, the 100 best companies to work for, the 25 most powerful lobbyists in Washington, the best companies for minority employees. And so they have more lists than that. There's just a whole group of them on a list. But you look at that Fortune 500 list, and really, that's really not something that's new. You know, we talk about how relevant is Scripture. Well, the book of Hebrews is chapter 11. This author here started lists 2,000 years ago. And when we look at this particular list and what he's doing here, it's not the Fortune 500, we might call it the Faith 500. If nothing else, as we look at this, he talks about these different individuals who have been faithful and who have demonstrated that faith. There's not 500 of them there because of space and time and all the other stuff. You just can't put it all in there. It's interesting, later on, verses 33 and 34, he just adds that there were others who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword. So there are a lot of other ones that are on this list. But the ones who are mentioned, I guess we could say that they're kind of the faith Hall of Famers. We have the Canton Hall of Fame going on now, Football Hall of Fame. I guess we can say that these are the Faith Hall of Famers that this author is writing about and listing here. But they were people who had just that sense of God's presence, that sense of listening to what God was saying to them and directing them to do and to be, and who responded, who acted on that vision. Faith for them, as it says in the very first verse. If you want a definition of faith, it's right there. That's probably as good a definition of faith as you're going to find anywhere. When he said faith, it's the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. It's being assured that things that you're hoping for It's being convicted that the things that you don't see are going to transpire, that are going to happen. It's that unseen belief in something. And once it happens, once it occurs, it's no longer faith, it's fact. But faith is believing in the unseen, hoping for things, giving out assurance of things that are hoped for, and conviction of things not seen. That's faith. And we look at this list, and I think there's one thing we need to keep in mind. All of the ones that are listed here, all the ones that are talked about, they're talked about in faith in terms of a verb. It's action. Their faith is action. They acted on something. They responded. They stepped out in faith. In other words, faith is more than just thinking something through, or it's more than just wishful thinking, or just a presumption, or just an idea, or just trying to formalize something in our minds. It's more than something that we think. I like one definition I saw of faith. It says, the train of faith leaves the station on the twin rails of the mind and the will. A person of faith always, always, always is a person in motion. A person in motion. Faith is not just sit on a bench and wait. But faith is put into action. I mean, you look at this list, and you look at the list, I guess Mr. Faith himself would be Abraham, because he seems to get the most ink in this chapter. You know, as you look at this, Abraham was by faith. He took his family, and he left his home. He left a place where he was familiar with. He left people he knew, and he stepped out, and he went to some place that was nowhere and became a stranger. At 100 years old, he had his first child. He was promised children for years. But it wasn't until he was 100 years old that he had his first child. And then after he has that first child, by faith, he's willing to offer that child as a human sacrifice. Although he didn't have to do that, he was willing because of his faithfulness in God. See, it's his activity of faith that marks him as a person of faith. Not just what he thought, but what he said about what he did. That marked him as a person of faith. That put him in this faith hall of fame. As we look at that. And the same thing with all those that are on the list. If you read through that chapter, you know, I think faith is written like 24 times. The word faith is used 24 times in that chapter. It talks about Abel. He offers a sacrifice. He puts it into action. Noah, he builds a boat. Moses, he steps away from a burning bush and brings his people out of Egypt. There was one woman on the list, Rahab. By faith, she helped and hid Israelite spies. And there are other names on that list we're familiar with. Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and Samson and Gideon and David and Samuel. The list goes on and on and on. All these people of faith. All these powerful action figures. You know, we talk about action figures. These are the action figures of faith. Like their activity of faith in itself. And that gets them in this Faith 500, this Faith Hall of Famers. Now keep in mind, it's interesting as you look at that, these people weren't perfect. They were human. And you look at the list, these folks messed up. And when they messed up, sometimes it got pretty ugly. When you really look at some of the situations in their lives, yeah, they obeyed God. But Noah, after the flood, he got drunk and passed out naked in his tent. Abraham, he lied twice about his wife to protect himself and put her in danger. Jacob, he cheated Esau. I mean, he was a real wheeler and dealer. Let me tell you, he was a con man. Moses, he killed an Egyptian. He took another person's wife. Rahab, she supported herself by being a prostitute. Samson, he had a weakness for strong